Greetings, comrades. I bring you news from the front. I am pleased to announce that our hex against capitalism is continuing to slowly drain energy from the United States economy and to lead to mass chaos. It's all because of the hex that we launched on capitalism on Halloween of 2020. Very powerful energy. It's Wednesday afternoon. It's cloudy here in Texas. I hear you're gonna have snow pretty soon in Colorado Springs. There's gonna be a 3-day snowstorm coming in from the west. So then I guess it's heading south. It looks like it will stick around in the Woodland Park, Florissant area for 4 days, be in Colorado Springs for 3 days, be in Pueblo for 2 days. So big storm, and wouldn't you know it, the goddamn police department in Colorado Springs is sweeping the tents from in front of the Springs rescue mission in advance of the snowstorm. Means that people are being deprived of their supplies that they need to keep warm. That's the kind of thing that will literally just kill people. And there are NIMBYs meaning not in my backyard people, who militantly oppose even reformist efforts at affordable housing in Colorado Springs that will be in the comment section, like being like, oh, well, they should find a job, they should do this, they should do this. They want to apply all these fucking morality tests to it. Those people don't deserve to freeze to death, period. And the idea that folks should just let people die because they don't have enough money, that the police would kind of encourage them to die. It's like a passive genocide. Bell Hooks describes it really well in Class Matters. It's like we contain homelessness and push it out of sight and just like let people die in places that we don't get to see. And it's disgusting, and the city should be ashamed of themselves for sending the police to sweep people from the front of the Springs Rescue Mission. A lot of those folks can't get into the Springs Rescue Mission. A lot of them have been banned. A lot of them have had trouble following the rules, or they have trouble with addiction, or mental health issues. I remember speaking to one woman who had hearing problems, and getting into the shelters was really difficult for her because she couldn't communicate with what they were saying. She couldn't hear what they were saying. Another time, like, someone was trying to like read a document that they had given her, a ticket, and like they're dyslexic and they couldn't. So they don't do very much to actually address like why people are homeless. They don't do very much to help them get off the streets. They use these punitive shaming measures and these designs and structures that are meant to enforce social control and like these normative models of behavior. And like they think that it's totally reasonable, if you aren't willing to adapt to their normative model of behavior, that they just let you die. And it's fucked up. And yeah, it really makes my blood boil to see that kind of shit. 2 police cars and a city truck. Heidi Beadle took the picture of them. We're having a donation drop-off of supplies Thursday through Sunday from 5 to 7 p.m. There's going to be warm socks, gloves, tents, and sleeping bags are really going to be in demand. We definitely need those. They can literally be a life-saving item for someone. It is like sad, but there will be people out there who might lose fingers or toes if they survive. And so really, please bring it. I'm going to post the in the beginning of this, I mean, you already probably saw it if I'm saying this in the future tense, post the flyer that our wonderful treasurer Bex made. I said treasure, which is a little bit of a Freudian slip. Bex, you're a treasure. Yeah, please consider donating. If you can't come to the drop-off, I'll post a link in the comments. In other news of bullshit the police are up to, 4 men in their 50s were arrested by CSPD for selling drugs to the homeless around Dorchester Park. They're currently looking for a 5th person. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous because they are trying to these men are probably trying to just make ends meet amid a pandemic, amid all the stuff that's been going on in the economy. The disruption to the supply chain caused by the arrest of any low-level dealers or any kind of like interruption to the drug distribution infrastructure doesn't actually make people quit. It just raises the prices. So that boosts the profits for the black market. So every time you get a drug dealer off the streets, usually it's a low-level person. Usually it's not a high-level person, and it's probably they're barely making minimum wage. Like in Freakonomics, and I'm citing Freakonomics for crying out loud. I'm not citing the Communist Manifesto to make this argument, okay? You little right-wing snowflakes, don't get on my ass about how I'm being a commie here, because this is Freakonomics I'm citing. I'm not, but they talk about how the drug dealers in big cities a lot of the times barely make minimum wage. Like it's almost like a lottery thing, and it just fills an economic gap. It also allows for like some self-determination, self-sufficiency. But honestly, like the conditions of the black market are far worse than the conditions of the legitimate market. Which the legitimate market, clearly with the move to cannabis legalization, it has created class inequalities, and it perpetuates the same exploitative dynamics of capitalism everywhere. But still, it's a lot safer from just a pure I don't want people to die standpoint to have stuff available on a legal market. So my local news is FTP, 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 AC, AB. In state news, this is from the state legislature. SB 21122 is a bill that would allow local government agencies, harm reduction organizations, and first responders to bulk purchase opioid antagonists through the Opioid Antagonist Bulk Purchase Fund. A harm reduction organization, according to the Colorado Revised Statutes, I was really curious if we could qualify for this, means an organization that provides services, including medical care, counseling, homeless services, or drug treatments to individuals at risk of experiencing an opiate-related drug overdose event, or to the friends and family members of an at-risk individual. So that's actually something that, it doesn't specify a nonprofit organization. Since we're a public benefit cooperative, I think that we could reasonably qualify for that. Another bill, this one is before the state house. It's meant to clarify the authority of local governments to promote affordable housing, encouraging them to do so, but at the same time it was also clarifying that the provisions of the state rent control statute do not apply so long as land use restrictions create multiple options for developers, which seems vaguely like a way to ensure private development and discourage local governments from developing their own housing units or just taking public control over affordable housing, but it's also possible I don't understand this one. 700 nurses, this is getting into national news, have gone on strike at St. Vincent Hospital in Worcester, Massachusetts, protesting unsafe conditions. The hospital is owned by Dallas-based healthcare company Tenet Healthcare. The striking nurses plan to picket every day from 6 a.m. until midnight until a settlement is reached, according to the Massachusetts Nurses Association, as reported by NBC Boston. United Food and Commercial Workers Local 1445, in solidarity with the nurses, has launched an informational picket outside of the hospital, although they have not yet gone on strike. So solidarity with those nurses. Also solidarity with the 150 hospital workers in Bend, Oregon, who have also been on strike. They've been on strike for 3 days at St. Charles Hospital in Bend, Oregon. The union says that management ended negotiations on December 3rd and has not come back to the table. The hospital is hiring replacement workers to keep the system running in the meantime. Representatives from the two sides are expected to meet today. The Protect the Right to Organize Act heads to the Senate after being passed by the House with about 4 Republican votes for it and like maybe a couple Democratic votes against it. I think there was like 1 or 2. Chamber of Commerce and capitalist interest groups have lobbied hard against the bill in a predictable burst of anti-union hysteria. The Colorado Springs DSA and unions across the country hope to see it passed, although that's mainly the union bureaucracies, as WSWS has pointed out. They've critiqued the bill, saying, quote, "The bill seeks to tie up workers in the debilitating straitjacket of labor management laws designed to suppress rank-and-file militancy. For example, if an employer refuses to first contract after unionization, the issue will immediately be sent to the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, and then to an arbitration panel that would impose a binding agreement, thereby blocking workers from striking to enforce their demands. Other disputes would be channeled to the National Labor Relations Board, which the unions have long used to preempt struggles and impose the dictates of management." So I find those to be very compelling criticisms for the most part. They did also point out, WSWS did, some positive aspects of the bill, like that I think are worth it, but also like some negative aspects. So look into it and look at those further left criticisms. The WSWS further criticized the DSA for saying that the DSA, quote, "seeks to corral workers into the official trade unions in order to trap workers inside organizations that have assumed the character of corporatist syndicates." I think that's a valid criticism of some DSA chapters. Our local DSA chapter in Colorado Springs has been their Worker Solidarity and Unity Project has been advocating more militant organizing, has been prepared to go on strike, hasn't been doing those kinds of like conciliatory maneuvers, and they're also, I think, they're pretty, like the Wild Neighbors workers strike, they're with the IWW, which is a very good militant big union. And I think though that like it's hard to say what to think on this, because on one level I support stuff that's going to just make it easier to unionize in general, but there's a few things in the bill, like there was with HR 1, that like when you look at it are like, oh, that's disappointing. Which is kind of the way I feel like about the Democratic Party as a whole. Like, oh, there's some nice things here, but like there's a couple, like they do like a couple nice things. I mean, the Republicans, the only thing I can really like agree with them on sometimes is like gun controls, like being stupid as fuck. But like most of the time, like, yeah. I mean, I'm not their target audience anymore. I used to be a Republican, honestly, like, but I hate capitalism. I've just realized it, like, that so much of the things that I thought were like problems with like big government are problems with capitalism, and are problems with like corporate style capitalism that's kind of an inevitable consequence of capitalist development, because the like little anarcho-capitalist ideal of just like unfettered capitalism being somehow liberatory doesn't work, because power just ends up getting increasingly concentrated. There's my rant. I'd love to actually talk about this. I'd actually love to talk to some of the people who now consider themselves anarcho-capitalists at some point. I have one on Facebook that I talk to sometimes. But yeah, Republicans' main critiques of the PRO Act have focused on this as a favor for bosses and bureaucracies in the unions, which are rightfully criticized. But the problem with their argument is just that it's in bad faith, because they're really like heavily sponsored by like chambers of commerce and like these big old capitalist organizations, and so they want the unions to just be hardcore, full stop, pro-capitalist, voluntary, toothless organizations where they get weakened to the point of irrelevance, and kind of sucks. They're like, I don't really like either of the parties, because like, yeah, the Democrats are like, and I think WSWS puts it really well, that they're like very corporatist, in this way that really resembles authoritarian nationalism in a lot of places around the world. So I really just kind of associate the Democrats as like a different flavor of authoritarian nationalism that's just more corporatist than social Darwinist. But and an example of that about the authoritarian nationalism is the 1,400 children that are currently being held beyond the 3-day legal limit by Customs and Border Protection. CBP is now detaining the largest number of children in the agency's history. The previous record was set in February 2019. It was 5,900. And now there are 8,100 unaccompanied children being held in the detention facilities. At least 170 of them are under the age of 13. Advocates for migrant children have pointed out in a letter that one of my friends, who does a lot of work for immigrants in Colorado, shared on Facebook. She pointed out that, like, even if Border Patrol personnel at these facilities were to be like heavily trauma-informed, compassionate folks, and there's been widespread reports of abuse and even sexual abuse of these children in these border facilities. Even if they were to adopt like these very progressive, compassionate, trauma-informed means of caring for children, the act of detaining these children and putting them in detention is still traumatizing, and it damages their mental health in the long term. And really, like, anytime we're dealing with children, it doesn't matter what nation they come from. Like, it doesn't matter what country they come from, they're children, you know? A court has ruled against Trump in his libel suit against the New York Times, as the man who calls liberals and leftists snowflakes decides to take legal action about people who say mean things about him. I am only reading the headline of this. I did not read any of the coverage because I could not give more of a shit than just kind of vaguely laughing about it, because it's funny to see Trump sad and to see him lose in court. And hopefully he keeps losing and losing until he gets tired of losing. On March 9th, the United States extended temporary protected status to Venezuelans in the United States, although Human Rights Watch criticized them for not extending it to asylum seekers currently in Mexico, since that means that Venezuelans who have been expelled from the US to Mexico or sent to Mexico to await the processing of their asylum claims under Trump have been excluded from the protections. An estimated 323,000 Venezuelans, though, in the United States will benefit from that move. Human Rights Watch has argued for a region-wide protected status for Venezuelan refugees across the whole of the Americas. As I had mentioned earlier, Ivan Duque, the puppet of former president and current war criminal Uribe, did extend protected status to Venezuelans in Colombia. But that's like, it's like when Trump did the First Step Act. It's like, oh look, there's a tiny little pearl in this giant pile of shit. And from what I've heard about Duque, he's a giant pile of shit. Even if he did a nice thing once. Navy Admiral Philip Davidson, head of the Indo-Pacific Command, testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee yesterday, and he requested a doubling of defense spending to intensify the military buildup around Taiwan and the South China Sea, appearing to posture the U.S. for a future conflict with China in the coming years, saying, quote, we must absolutely be prepared to fight and win should competition turn to conflict, end quote. Secretary of State Abe Lincoln has also singled out China as a primary geopolitical rival for the United States, calling them, quote, the only country with the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological power to challenge the United States. I feel like, given that one of the primary audiences for this broadcast is in Colorado Springs, I don't need to tell you all that war is a terrible thing, and we should not wish any kind of escalation towards war, that we should not be trying to seek that kind of armed conflict, especially not with China, because it's between two nuclear powers, and it could quickly escalate to the point where we're using nuclear weapons, and there would be mutually assured destruction, and it would be terrible. It would destroy millions of lives, and there's no way that we should be accepting any kind of gesture towards military action against China. Period. I've criticized them for the Uyghurs. I've criticized them for Hong Kong. I don't like China, but I do not think that we should be maneuvering in this way where we are fueling this arms race in that region, because it's just going to kill people. It's going to be terrible. Fuck that shit. About 100 people, mostly policemen and their families, have reportedly fled from Myanmar to India after refusing orders to fire on protesters. So now I feel weird saying ACAB, because it seems like the police officers that quit because they won't shoot people are like, okay, I guess, maybe? One officer reports that, quote, inside the police station, 90% support the protesters, but there is no leader to unite them. Which is telling, because it's like, oh, you need a leader. Me like sitting here like as a crazy anarchist, I'm like, good, you don't have a leader. So you got 90% of the people, like, just do shit. Just, like, walk, like, all I mean, but still, I understand it's probably not that simple, but, like, whatever. This is as hoping to break the recent general strike, which was declared in the country this week. It started on Monday. The government blocked off the entrances to a neighborhood in Yangon that a bunch of striking railway workers live in, and they raided their homes and arrested 3 people. So, violent crackdown on the unions that are currently on strike. They're recognizing that this is, like, really going to hit them economically, and they want to intimidate the fuck out of these unions. So let's just have a lot of solidarity for these people in Myanmar as they're going on this general strike, because, damn, like, they're being brave as fuck right now. Yeah. The Myanmar junta has signed a $2 million contract with Israeli-Canadian lobbyist Ari Ben Menashe and his Montreal-based firm Dickens and Madison, which previously helped the Tunisian government interfere in their elections and has been kind of tied to a bunch of corrupt regime-based lobbying stuff in the past, including like for the Zimbabwean government. Ari Ben Menashe, look out for him. The Nepali Electoral Commission, and I told you I was going to try to learn about Nepal, and I've been learning a little bit about Nepal. The Nepali Electoral Commission has ruled that the Nepal Communist Party cannot use the name NCP because another communist party is already using the same name, adding to the ongoing turmoil as the many different communist parties in Nepal try to form a ruling coalition. This means that the party will now split back into Nepal Communist Party UML and Communist Party of Nepal Maoist Center after a 2018 merger. I came across a very compelling editorial that tried to analyze this as an instance of conflict between egos of septuagenarian communist rivals who've been leading in the country for a long time, and they pointed out that, like, in some of these communist parties, like, they view whoever's immediately to their, like, slightly to their right as a bigger threat than, like, the far right. And it's gotten to this point where some of these some of these people have, like, Prime Minister Ali has, like, made overtures to the far right Hindu nationalist parties in Nepal in order to try to, like, undermine his rivals in this other coalition. And so this editorial was calling for a new generation of leaders to step up. Frankly, I think that it's a sad thing when you have a communist party that is getting caught up in these, like, bureaucratic maneuvers instead of actually helping people, instead of actually fighting for the working class, because that's what the point of having a communist party is. And in Nepal, like, they're dealing with the same pandemic shit that we are, but also, like, the ravages of post-colonialism, of current, like, Chinese imperialism, of, like, just all these things, like the aftermath of the earthquake a few years ago, which decimated their infrastructure. And where is the help for the people who are being affected by that if all these communist parties that say that they're about fighting for the working class are just going to sit on their asses and debate over who gets to use what name? Like, I don't give a shit. I don't think most of the people in Nepal who are like suffering from the effects of the pandemic give a shit what name the party has, or like about like some 70-year-old dude's ego. Like, so that's my take on it. If you're from Nepal, let me know if I'm approaching the point or if I'm like just totally off base, because I'm still trying to understand the Nepali situation. I've always been very interested in Nepal just because I grew up in Colorado around all these mountains, and like another place that's like just full of mountains I just would really love to go visit someday. Anyway, a 35-year-old bystander was killed in Johannesburg, South Africa by police who were firing rubber bullets into a crowd of protesting students at the University of the Witwatersrand. Students began protesting in January to demand that people who owe up to $9,850 in fees be allowed to register for the next academic year. Many students in South Africa are caught in an ambiguous economic gray zone where they are neither poor enough to qualify for means-tested financial aid nor wealthy enough to pay for college on their own. Activists in South Africa have been pushing for free higher education for years, since lack of access to higher education is one of the ways the apartheid inequalities between, African people, mixed race people, Indian people, Afrikaner people, and British descended people are all like it's maintained. And in 2016, this has been going on for a while. 2016, the student protests actually caused multiple universities to close across the country, and it's a shame to see this kind of militant policing efforts, but it goes on all around the world. It's just the way that the capitalist system has learned to try to maintain itself. It requires violence to be maintained. A unified parliament in Libya formally voted to form an interim government in advance of elections in December, which the United Nations applauded. Libyan billionaire Abdul Hamid Dibeiba is currently serving as interim prime minister. He is calling for the departure of foreign mercenaries and working to demarcate a maritime border with Turkey in order to begin natural gas extraction. Currently, more than a third of the population lives on less than $2 a day. Access to clean water is limited, and the country faces regular blackouts in major cities after 10 years of war that was really instigated by U.S. interventionism. The liberal media, exemplified by the New York Times, has covered the situation in Libya as an example of the need for more U.S. intervention in the global south, pointing to our refusal to stage an occupation of the country after encouraging the ousting of Gaddafi as responsible for the current state of the country, and ignoring any responsibility that U.S. interventionism has for the current state of Libya. The Arab Weekly reports, quote, discontent is brewing in the ranks of Lebanon's security forces over a currency crash, wiping out most of the value of their salaries as unrest and crime surge. Protesters yesterday set up roadblocks throughout the country. After last year's explosion in Beirut, the government resigned, and the political class has since then failed to assemble a new cabinet for the country. Protesters in Lebanon are calling for the revival of a massive 2019 street movement that swept through the country. A U.S.-led coalition launched another airstrike against ISIS militants in northern Iraq outside of Nineveh, followed by a raid by Iraqi security forces that they say killed 2 men wearing vests with bombs. I could find very sparse reporting on this. All I know, though, is that there's another airstrike. The U.S. is still launching these airstrikes, so we're militarily involved in a lot of places, and as I said earlier, looking to play a dick measuring contest with China. So, moving to Brazil now, and I've spent a lot of time in Brazil, so this is really hard for me to see. But 15 out of 27 state capitals in Brazil are at 90% ICU capacity or above due to the COVID pandemic. 25 out of 27 have reached 80% capacity, according to the Fundação Oswaldo Cruz, a scientific research institution in Rio de Janeiro. In Porto Alegre and Campo Grande, which are the capitals of Rio Grande do Sul and Mato Grosso do Sul, which are Rio Grande do Sul is one of the most wealthy states in Brazil. It's the home state of former President Getúlio Vargas. It's got a lot of Italian and German immigrants that lived there, so it's one of the whiter states of Brazil. And then, meanwhile, Mato Grosso do Sul is a state on, I think, like the border kind of with Bolivia, if I'm not mistaken. It might be like Bolivia and Paraguay, but it's more like the center west of the country, and so has been a site of a lot of agricultural expansion, but it would probably be considered one of the less developed states. So this is one of the most developed states and probably one of the less developed states in Brazil. Though their ICUs there are over capacity, which is really sad. They had shortages of oxygen in the Amazon recently as well. Like, they couldn't provide oxygen for people who are dying in the hospitals. The fight against COVID, this is what Fiocruz's, that's the Oswaldo Cruz Institute, Gisam Orellana said. She's quoted by AFP news agency. She said, "The fight against COVID-19 was lost in 2020, and there is not the slightest chance of reversing this tragic circumstance in the first half of 2021. The best we can do is hope for a miracle of mass vaccination or of the pandemic, or a radical change in the management of the pandemic. Impunity in management seems to be the rule," end quote. A new, more infectious coronavirus variant in Brazil has the potential to spread well outside of the country, which presents a risk to everyone around the world. Jair Bolsonaro continues to have his head up his ass. Ele continua tem seu cabeça na sua cu. I don't know if I said that right. I probably got the gender wrong of some of those words and the conjugation wrong. But you all who speak Portuguese know what I'm saying. He continues to resist imposing or encouraging social distancing measures or mask mandates, and has urged Brazilians to stop whining about the pandemic. For his part, newly freed former president and potential 2022 challenger Lula da Silva has called Bolsonaro an imbecile. Lula da Silva's, I just added because this is the end, and you deserve something heartwarming at the end. Lula da Silva's name translates to forest squid, or really squid of the forest. We want to be even more literal because it's da Silva. It's like squid of the forest because it's like slurred together. It's like the most literal translation I can do of Lula's name. So squid of the forest will hopefully destroy Bolsonaro in the coming election, and hopefully me saying that does not get my Brazilian visa revoked, because I would like to go back. But, para Bolsonaro, eu tenho mensagem para você. Você vai se foder. Você vai se foder. Eu espero que você tenha muitas dificuldades e que dia você pode remover sua cabeça do seu cu. I think I got the gender right when I said the pull your head out of your ass thing. Yeah, great. That's your Portuguese lesson for today. In the meantime, I don't actually know how much time this has taken. 33 minutes. That's not that bad. That's better than yesterday. Now it's up to you. It's up to you to go out and agitate and start unionizing your workplace. Talk to your friends about unionizing. Talk to your neighbors. Just get to know what their needs are. Get to know them. Like, build some class solidarity out there. Build some motherfucking solidarity. Great way to be helpful too is be a prepper. Be a community prepper though. Like, get food, get ammunition, get guns, get water, get all the supplies you would need to help not just yourself, but like the people around you to survive. Get to know what other people's skills are, get to know what other people are interested in, what they're like around you, and use that as like your way of, when there's a natural disaster, like, we'll be ready. We'll be ready to like survive without the state, and we'll be able to like take back control of our lives and use the gradual breakdown of civilization as a composting as a composting fuel as we begin to regrow as a new decentralized leaderless society. We will eat the corpse of civilization from within and turn it into a beautiful macro collage of fungi and bacteria and life and soil. That's what we will do. That wasn't actually ironic either. I feel it's not actually ironic. The ironic part is when I tell you, and now, in solidarity with the insurrectionary Bidenist vanguard, we will play the Soviet national anthem and observe the memes.